Today we're going to talk about how to get your ex to initiate contact with you first. And I promise you that if you stick around until the end of this video, I'm going to show you or dispel one of the biggest misconceptions that you are having right now about getting your ex to contact you first, and what actually works to make that happen. But first, if you're familiar with my videos, you know that the first thing I ask you to do if you're in this process of trying to figure out how to get your ex to contact you first, or trying to figure out if you should even get your ex back or not, is to help you understand what your overall chances of success are with your ex. On my website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, I've put together a special quiz designed to basically answer that exact question. It's a simple 2-minute free quiz, and all you have to do if you want to take it is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on it. It's that simple. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let's actually get to the real content of this video. So let's start off and talk about the biggest misconception that you probably have about getting your ex to contact you first. So what is that big misconception? Now, any of you who've probably watched any of my previous videos know that I'm a big believer in the fact that getting your ex to contact you first isn't as valuable as you ending the conversation first. But that's actually not the misconception that I'm seeing a lot of people having. In fact, this misconception is so gigantic that I myself have fallen victim to it. And that's the idea that silence, that ignoring your ex will make them contact you first. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you ignore your ex and expect them to contact you first, that's usually not what happens. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there and thinking, how can you, someone who is adamant about me doing the no contact rule, be saying that it's not going to work to get him to reach out to me first? Well, here's the truth. Almost everyone I've ever met at the beginning of trying to get an ex back or even trying to get over a breakup looks at the no contact rule the same way. They look at it as, what can this do to make them contact me? What can this do to make them miss me? But the point of the no contact rule is to focus on yourself. But that still doesn't answer the ultimate question. Why isn't it that silence will make an ex reach out to you first? Well, if you know anything about me, you know that I do not want to advise anyone to do anything without any kind of proof to back up my claims. This is actually a mistake that I used to fall into myself when I first started Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. Instead of actually doing the research and polling different people and actually understanding their experiences as they go through a breakup, I would just make assumptions based on my own opinions. And while that maybe is a good way to make an interesting article, for example, it's not a great way of helping you go forward. So I decided to challenge my initial assumptions about using silence to make a man contact you. And I did that by actually utilizing my private Facebook support group. Now, if you don't know, this isn't a pitch or anything, but we basically have this special private Facebook support group for anyone who purchases the Ex-Boyfriend Recovery Program, my flagship course on basically teaching you how to get your ex back or even how to get over your ex. Anyone who purchases it gets access to this special private Facebook group where you get to watch Facebook Lives of me every single week, and also Coach Anna, or even sometimes my wife, are the moderators of the Facebook group. So anyways, to date we have about 3,700 members, so I thought it'd be kind of interesting to ask them a simple question. How many of you who have completed a no contact rule had an ex contact you during it? The results were actually a little shocking to me. So here were the results. Out of 47 people that answered my poll, 29 of them said that their ex did not reach out during the no contact, while 18 said that their ex did reach out during the no contact rule. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that roughly 62% of the participants of this poll had an ex not reach out to them when they used complete silence on them. So why? That's the ultimate question we're trying to answer here. And it's my belief that men are stubborn. This is the big reason why they don't want to break the silence during a no contact rule. They want to make you be the one to reach out to them first. But that doesn't really answer our initial question of how we can get them to reach out to us first. Now, you remember that little saying I said at the beginning of this video where I said it doesn't really matter who reaches out to who first, but who ends the conversation first? Turns out that's actually true. There are actually 2 psychological factors that you need to quote unquote master if you want your ex to reach out to you first. And when I say you want to master getting them to reach out to you first, it's not really much mastering this technique or saying this thing that will get them to reach out to you first. It's really more about fostering and creating an environment where it's just natural for them to want to reach out to you first. So what are these 2 psychological characteristics? Well, believe it or not, if you want them to reach out to you first, you need to first have a conversation with them that satisfies them. Now, if you know the way I recommend to do the no contact rule, you'll know that actually I tell women to reach out to men first. Often my go-to saying is, remember, it's about who ends the conversation more about than who starts the conversation. But really what I'm not telling you there in that quote is that when you reach out to them first, it gives you an opportunity to create a satisfying conversation. In fact, I would actually argue that this is the #1 area where people struggle. A lot of people fail the no contact rule. Yes, we have actually done research and learned that 80% of people who try a no contact rule will not get through it. They'll fail it at some point. But that's not really where they struggle. Where they struggle is getting back in touch with their ex, building rapport, making conversations satisfying. And the trick is, if you want your ex to reach out to you first, if you want them to initiate contact with you, you need to actually get in a consistent state where you guys are having consistent, satisfying conversations. Now, satisfying conversations are different depending on the individuals. For some, a satisfying conversation could be a 10-minute conversation. For others, it's an hour-long conversation. So how should you end these conversations once they become satisfying? Well, that's where the second psychological concept comes into play, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounced this, but I believe it's called the Zeigarnik Effect. Again, I am not the best with pronunciation, but here's what the Zeigarnik Effect means. It was basically fostered or created by this woman named Bluma Zeigarnik. She's a scientist, and she once learned that people remember interrupted or incomplete tasks better than completed ones. In other words, people are addicted to cliffhangers. Now, this is actually a concept that I talk about a lot, but if you've ever noticed your favorite Hollywood TV shows, or the reason that you Netflix binge watch TV shows, is really it's based on the fact that they're ending their episodes on a cliffhanger. Let's use Netflix as an example. Netflix is kind of an odd scenario, but that's why I chose it, because Netflix actually releases all of their content at once. But how many of us have gotten so sucked into watching a Netflix show, it's 2 a.m. in the morning, we know we have to go to work the next day, but we just say those fatal last words. Just one more episode. What causes you to watch that extra episode, what causes you to lose sleep and have a miserable day at work the next day until you can actually come home and finish that Netflix show, is the cliffhanger at the end of the episode. You have to find out what happens next. This is the Zeigarnik Effect at work. It interrupts the story in the middle or the most exciting part to the point where you're like, hey, I want to find out what happens next. So once we actually started recommending our clients do this in conversations with their exes, we saw an almost immediate turnaround. But how do you do this with your ex? Well, the first ingredient we've already talked about. You need to be having a satisfying conversation with your ex. Usually there's a point in that conversation where it becomes less satisfying and more longish and boring. You want to make sure you end the conversation before you hit that down point where the conversation kind of hits the lull. That's often where you see awkward silences where you've talked about so many different things, neither party has anything left to talk about. So I usually tell my clients that this is more of a gut feeling. Usually when you're having a conversation on the phone or when you're texting your ex and you're thinking to yourself, I don't want this to end, is the precise moment you should end it. This ends the conversation prematurely. There's always a million different excuses. I've written a million different articles about how you can end conversations on my website, Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. You can go check them out. But here's the point we're trying to get across. You want the conversation to end abruptly and prematurely because you want your ex to want more. Now, what happens when you combine satisfaction and the Zeigarnik Effect? Well, a lot of people expect immediate results. They expect their ex to reach out to them the very next morning, wanting to finish the conversation or wanting to talk about something else. but it doesn't always work out that way. Here's what we've learned. If you actually have a satisfying conversation with your ex, and if you're consistent about ending the conversations first at the high point of the conversation, it's not always enough to get them to initiate contact with you first. Instead, what you need to do is you need to have a lot of satisfying and premature ends to your conversations. Because eventually, the more you do this, the more you develop this pattern, they are just naturally going to want to reach out to you first. Eventually, you'll interrupt a conversation that was so good, they'll have to find out what happens next. Eventually, you'll have such a satisfying conversation that they're going to want to talk to you again the next day. What's important is that you're consistent about you having satisfying conversations and ending those conversations first, because that will foster the environment that's needed for them to initiate to you. Okay, so that's the end of the video. I typically end these videos by saying, hey, check out the quiz I talked about at the beginning of the video. You know, the one that will help you understand what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. Look in the description link below if you're interested in that. But today I wanted to talk to you about something a little bit more serious, and that's my YouTube channel. I need subscribers in order to keep it going. So this is something I don't often do, but I really would love you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you're a little iffy about subscribing to the YouTube channel, if you could please just like or even comment on the videos, because that tells YouTube that this video helped you. And we need you to tell YouTube that the video is satisfying and also ends a bit prematurely.